I do think kindness is a moral virtue, even if it is self-serving. I can help an old lady who's vulnerable across the street, and I've done a good act for her. And I also know that I will probably feel a bit better about myself.
If the self-serving aspect sort of trumps the idea of kindness, it's not morally virtuous. Because the essence of virtue lies with intention.
Welcome back to Think Twice, your favorite moral philosophy and ethics show. If you're new to the channel, my name's Sam Tef.
Yo, and I'm Ben Urbano.
And we are two friends from South London who love ethics and philosophy. Every week we break down a topic into 3 segments.
And hopefully you get a better understanding of the morality of things or a understanding of a philosophical ideology.
And most importantly, you're going to enjoy our conversation for the next half an hour.
Indeed.
Today's topic, as you've seen in the title, is kindness. And it's probably worth us defining kindness before we get into it, because obviously kindness can mean a lot of things in different contexts. But for the purpose of this conversation, kindness is the quality of being generous, friendly, and compassionate. And obviously acts of kindness are when you do those things, which leads us quite
I feel like
nicely.
kindness is a behavior though, right?
Yeah,
okay.
So when you do those things of like being friendly, generous, and considerate, when you act in those ways, that behavior, we call that kindness, I think. Which leads us nicely into segment 1. Benz, is kindness a moral virtue when it is also self-serving?
No.
Really?
Did you say yeah? Oh, right. I think because the essence of virtue lies with intention. So if your intention is solely to be self-serving, it cannot be kindness. And I generally think like most ideologies agree with me. You can sort of make an argument in the end that it's a morally good thing, but you couldn't make the argument that it's a morally virtuous thing.
Is it a moral virtue though when it's both self-serving and also kind? So like, as we said, kindness as a behavior is when you are generous, friendly, or considerate. If I'm considerate to someone, and I know that's also going to serve me in some way, could that be morally virtuous?
That can be.
Right.
It can be, but if the goal is to be self-serving, or the self-serving aspect sort of trumps the idea of kindness, it's not morally virtuous.
Yeah, and I think what you're pointing to is that deontological, like, rule-setting type of ethics, in that if you are doing something selfish, it can't be morally virtuous.
Not only just deontology, you've got like virtue ethics.
That's true.
And even, I'd go as far to say like utilitarianism. Because even utilitarianism, you could maybe argue that it's like a morally good act, or it's the right thing to do, but that doesn't make you virtuous. I think the essence of virtue lies within the intention.
Yeah, but I would have thought for consequentialist like theory and utilitarianism, which is a consequentialist school of thought, if the net good is positive, which I think we are in agreement that this act, the net positive, is good.
Yeah.
I would argue in that scenario, utilitarianism tells us that that is virtuous, as long as it increases the net good for humanity.
No, but it doesn't really tell you that the behavior is virtuous. It tells you that it's good and it's the right thing to do.
I would equate that with morally virtuous in the utilitarian sense.
But I think virtue, the idea of virtue is for you to be
a certain type of person.
Precisely. Irrespective of the outcome, virtue is reliant on your intention. It's like heavily reliant on your intention. You can be virtuous irrespective of the outcome. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And in the consequentialist theory, like utilitarianism, you're basically arguing that that's the morally right thing to do. That's the morally good thing to do. But you're not arguing it's the morally virtuous thing to do.
Yeah, I think there might be a bit of a conflation between a morally virtuous act and a morally virtuous person. Do you see what I'm saying? So like, I think you're talking from a virtue ethics point of view, sure, that you can't call yourself a virtuous person from a virtue ethics point of view because you do an act that overall like increasing net good. That's not what the point is. The point is like, who are you, right? And you can't call yourself a virtuous person via that route. But I think from my point of view, I mean, you've tweaked it by now. My answer is yes. I do think kindness is a moral virtue, even if it is self-serving, for that reason, that you can be both self-serving and kind in the same act. Like, I can help an old lady who's vulnerable across the street, and I've done a good act for her. And I also know that when I do that, I will probably feel a bit better about myself and I'll have a good day. Or like I'll have a better day than if I didn't do that act. So I think acts can be both. It is a bit icky sometimes when you see someone who's clearly doing something that they're telling people is virtuous, but it's clearly for their own self-service.
Yeah.
That is icky. But I sort of straddle both sides of the fence. I take a utilitarian approach in that I do want the net positive to be good for humanity. But I also am wary of like that, the deontology, the virtue ethics side of things that you're saying, that you want someone to be a virtuous person as well, not just devious.
No, but I think for an act to be like considered virtuous, because that's basically what we're saying. Like if you help the lady across the road, the act has to be considered virtuous. In and of itself, to be considered virtuous, the intention has to matter.
I hear that, but in utilitarianism, the intention is not of any importance. It's about the result. So that's the only way to judge actions.
Precisely. Like it's about the result, but in utilitarianism, it's not judging your virtue. It's judging your act.
But to get to the point of what is virtuous, utilitarian does go that far. It says this is virtuous if the net good hasn't been increased. I mean, that's why I understood the theory.
I understand the theory to say a behavior is right or wrong or good or bad. Not so much is it virtuous.
Yeah, and on some level we're arguing like about semantics a little bit.
Well, because I've got something from John Stuart Mill basically, like, and Mill might suggest that consequences of an action determine its moral worth, which you said. If a self-serving act of kindness results in a greater overall happiness, it could be considered a virtue in a practical sense. However, Mill would likely distinguish between acts that are genuinely altruistic versus those that are primarily motivated by self-interest.
Right, and I believe Mill is one of the
John
daddies
Stuart Mill's,
of utilitarianism. So what do you understand by that quote? Is that the intention still matters for him?
Precisely,
right,
for it to be considered virtuous. It definitely has moral worth.
Yeah.
It's definitely the right thing to do. But is it virtuous? And I don't think it is. And that's what I was just saying by like the majority of ideologies generally agree with that.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I think we've come to a consensus on what we believe there.
Question 2 is kindness an innate human trait or a learned behavior?
To me, it's an innate human trait.
Sure.
If you lot are long-time viewers of the channel, that won't have surprised you. Neither will Ben's response that he's about to give us right now. What do you think?
I think it's a bit of both.
Okay. I like that.
I actually think it's a bit of both. I think it's a blend of innate traits and learned behavior.
Can I focus you on the innate trait part of your answer?
Okay.
Because obviously I think it's more an innate human trait than it is a learned behavior. I do share what you're saying, that we also learn behaviors around kindness. Like, what is a kind act? How does that look? How do you do it? That is a learned behavior. I do agree with that. But what part of it do you think is innate?
So empathy and the idea that humans like to help and share.
Okay.
So there are like studies showing like babies often show distress when they hear other infants crying, which would like suggest that you feel empathy from a young age. And young children engage in sharing and helping behaviors even before they're taught. But this is the learnt behavior bit. But people that grow up around a culture or around a family which show acts of kindness, a child will then show those same acts of kindness.
Right.
And how it's shown. And that's why I believe it's kind of a bit of both, but that's why I probably lean a bit more to the learned behavior, because kindness is a behavior, an act.
Right. That's fair.
So therefore it has to lean towards more of a behavior, but it is a bit of both. And you know, I usually sit on the
People are born bad.
Yeah, precisely.
And learn good.
Precisely, yeah. I'm usually on that. And it doesn't sort of contradict that, because I still think if you had to survive, you wouldn't help and share as much, and you wouldn't show as much empathy if you felt in danger. And so I think that always trumps it, but it doesn't mean that humans don't have it.
Okay, I would say that is a bit of a contradiction. I'm a bit disarmed by your answer. let me be honest. I thought we'd be on different sides of the fence here, but especially if you're telling me compassion and empathy were born with that, then we're kind of in the same camp here.
No, but I've never argued that you're not born with it. I just argue that the other things are a bit more prevalent.
Selfishness.
Precisely. And the idea that you want to survive.
Survival of the fittest, almost.
Precisely, yeah.
Okay.
Is a bit more crucial to people and humans than the acts of empathy and the acts of sharing and the acts of helping.
It's funny that you mentioned like when you're in danger and like survival of the fittest. There's a book by a guy called Peter Kropotkin. I think I might have mispronounced his name, but it's a book called Mutual Aid. And in it, he tries to basically debunk the idea that in the animal kingdom and also in humanity, we have this sort of selfish drive to survive that makes us selfish. Do you see what I'm trying to say? He tries to like make the claim that our tendency is like to actually work amongst each other and collaborate and share, like you said. And it goes beyond, for him, like our personal empathy or our personal love is like this innate thing that all humans are born with, that we all share, that we all act on a daily basis. And I tend to agree with him that whilst there is this like evolution that has potentially conditioned us to be a certain way as human beings, I think we also have this thing where if we see another human in need, we have this thing that we can't explain in us, innate feeling to help that person. So I would somewhat reject the like, when the chips are down, when we're in survival mode, the compassion and empathy is turned off and the selfishness ramped up. I would somewhat reject that. But it sounds like we're in a similar camp right now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a disagreement. Where is it?
The question is it an innate human trait or a learned behavior? And I think it's a bit of both. If I had to lean more to one thing, I'd say it's more of a learned behavior.
If I change the question, I said, is empathy an innate human trait or a learned behavior? What would you say?
I'd say that's an innate human trait. But hold on, which one do you think it is? Kindness, sorry.
Innate human trait. I do appreciate that there's some learned behavior there.
Precisely, because like kindness is obviously a behavior, it's an act. And how you learn to be kind is through what you've witnessed.
Kindness is an act, but it precedes the act as well.
It's a makeup of different biological traits that you get from birth, like empathy, sharing, and helping. So because those, and then that results in an act of kindness.
Sure. So there's the state of being before the act happens, and then you act on that state of being.
Precisely. And even in the next segment, we'll come to how people use that act and use that behavior. And therefore, in a particular scenario, two people can see opposing ideas as acts of kindness. That's why I feel like it has to be more of a learnt behavior than an innate trait.
That's actually an interesting point. Because what is kind to one person isn't to another.
Precisely.
A good example of that is like tough love. If someone shows a child that they're teaching something, a bit of tough love, to that adult, it is love. Like they're doing it in a compassionate way. It is kind to them because they're trying to get that child to learn a certain behavior or adopt a certain skill. To the child who receives it or someone who's watching, it might not be kindness. So that's actually a very interesting point that you make. And I do actually see the difficulty in calling it innate when people will have different opinions.
Exactly,
because we can't square that circle. We can't
But you can't have those acts of kindness without those innate traits. That's why I was like, it has to be a bit of both.
Yeah. Do you think there's something about humans that allows us to display empathy and compassion outside of like other animals? Do you think there's a difference between us and like, say, chimps or wolves or something like that?
There has to be, because we're able to communicate. It's not even so much that we're able to communicate, we have language. Language is probably a better word to use, because other animals can communicate. But when you have language, it helps you decipher exactly how somebody's feeling about something. And that language is what separates the two.
Have you seen some of these animal documentaries? Some of these chimps are advanced. Like when they do the like puzzles and stuff. It's a bit spooky. Like some of their behavior is like so human-like that you're like, what the hell? But yeah, I think that book was super interesting because the Peter Kropotkin book, because he talks about how many mutual aid relationships there are between different species and also within a species. And obviously he uses that to support the claim that we have this thing that every other animal has. And I think back to some of the Nature Geographic documentaries where like I see birds inside the crocodile's mouth and it's like picking food out of the crocodile's teeth. And I'm like, why doesn't the crocodile eat the bird? And it's because of these like mutual relationships where both can benefit. And it's not just about survival of the fittest. Because if it was just that, the crocodile would eat the bird. Because there's food. Good, let's have it.
No, but like, this is like, I think the common misconception with what I say sometimes.
No, I'm not.
Oh, right,
this is just a separate point. I'm
okay.
not refuting anything you said. I think we're in agreement on this segment. I think that's a good place for us to move on.
On to the next segment. You have a close friend who is in financial trouble since losing his job 2 years ago. At the time, he asked you to lend him some money to cover his immediate expenses, including rent. You were happy to help him through a tough period while he looked for a new job. Since then, his financial situation hasn't improved much, and his job search has been unsuccessful. He has asked to borrow money several times over 2 years, and each time you have given him what he has asked for. While the amounts you have lent him are significant, you are able to continue lending him money provided he pays you back eventually. If you stopped lending him money, you believe it would re-energize his job search and help him become self-sufficient. However, it would put him in serious financial insecurity in the short term. Do you continue to lend him the money or stop?
I continue to lend him the money.
Really? I didn't think you were going to say that.
Really?
Yeah.
There's a few things at play here. Number one is obviously in the short term, I'm going to put him in a really bad spot. And I could potentially be responsible for him getting kicked out of his house or something like that. That's sort of the immediate effect. The second thing I thought about was, is there another way to help him get the good things out of what would happen if I stopped? Get some of that positive stuff, but still support him financially. And I think there is a way. There must be a way where I can still continue to support him financially, but also re-energize his job search, but also reinvigorate him. And I trust that I would be able to find that way to be able to re-galvanize him. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you have to give him the bread. Simply because your relationship is greater than whether he finds a job or not.
Yeah.
That was basically where I fell on it, that if I don't lend him the bread and then he really struggles, your relationship is not going to recover.
It's not going to recover from that.
It's not going to recover from that. And my relationship is more important to me than him getting a job.
Yeah, absolutely. What made you think I'd say no?
Thought you were like a tough love kind of guy sometimes.
No, I wouldn't.
Because sometimes you know better for people, innit? That's what I thought.
That's a fair point. Yeah, I did do that a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought you would be like, oh, nah, like, if I'm going to go get him his job, like, he just needs this for a little bit. He'll get over it.
No. I think there's an argument for tough love. There always is an argument for tough love. But it's one of these things where, like, I try to put myself in the other person's shoes. And I think in most scenarios, including this one, I don't think he would want me to show him tough love. Even if it worked out in the end and he managed to find a job and stuff like that, like, he'd probably still hold it against you.
Yeah, I'd be more likely to do this for, like, a child or a brother.
Right.
Like, if it was, like, my little brother or something, I'm more likely to do this and withhold the money.
But, like, the older and more, like, mature that person is.
It's not even so much the older, it's the fact that, like, I think our relationship can withstand it.
Okay.
And I think it's better for you. Do you know what I mean? Like, if it got really bad, you could still shout me. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not the end of the world. I'll still be able to cover it.
Yeah.
But I think I owe more to my family than I do to my friend. And I think once you owe more, you have to be willing to potentially jeopardize your relationship for the betterment of your family.
Oh, so you'd risk it a bit more?
Yeah.
In that scenario?
One, because your relationship's stronger. So you might not ever get to that. And secondly, because I care about the outcome a bit more.
Do you feel like the tough love route is a better way to get to the final destination?
Yeah, I do actually.
Really?
Yeah, I do. If given the information that we have here,
sure, yeah.
that like he's gonna actually re-energize his job search, then yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
I think that's fair. That's fair. And I did write the scenario, so. Yeah, I don't know if I'm a tough love kind of guy. I once was that guy.
You were, right?
Yeah, I changed now.
To you, man?
I don't know, man. I softened up. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Much love. Take care. that one turned on?
It might take me a few stabs, but
Easy.
cool. Take out named.
Yeah, that's what threw me up there. You see that?
That was a big error.
Yeah.
How long was that?
25. Fuck, turn this thing off.